We are on. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second day of the Connex event here in Portland. And I'm Bonny Peterson with the Industrial Hemp Association of Washington and the Association of Western Hemp Professionals.
I'm Dylan Summers. I work for Lazarus Naturals, and I'm a founding member of the Association for Western Hemp Professionals as well.
My name is Bill Sear. I'm the owner of Unique Food Works, founding member of the Washington Industrial Hemp Association, Washington State, and also founding member of the Association of Western Hemp Professionals, and been involved since 2014 and hemp since 2016.
Okay, so we are here today to discuss multiple things. The main being kind of what it looks like going forward in the industry and how associations help the industry communicate and move forward together as we build this Wild West of hemp.
Yeah, I figured I'd start off with my personal story with Lazarus Naturals and kind of the evolution of where we started as a small few group of folks, group of Seattleites, and expanded out from there and running into certain trials and tribulations and understanding the worth of associations. We started operations back in 2014. At that time, we were kind of young and ambitious, entering into the cannabis market in whole. It took us a very short period of time to realize that the recreational side, the adult use side, wasn't quite our lane. We were going into it with kind of a sense of idealism. I think we still do at Lazarus Naturals, but we saw there's nothing wrong with THC, that side of things, but we saw that people were having a lot of great use with CBD, and we knew that we could derive CBD from hemp, and that hemp had significantly fewer barriers to entry. So we got into it and thought, oh my gosh, this thing it's easy peasy, it's clear cut. Marijuana is pretty much, like I said, gotten a lot of barriers to entry. Hemp, not so much. Well, we quickly realized that there's where the marijuana side has, barriers to entry. A lot of things are defined. Hemp wasn't very defined, and there was a lot of loopholes and wiggle room and lack of clarity, even with people in the industry and people, especially in the legislature and regulators and all that, like trying to figure it out. A lot of good work was being done, but there's still some sense of confusion. So we learned pretty quick that, okay, well, if we want to see things the way that we think things ought to turn out, we're going to have to interact. We're going to have to go out there and send somebody. I was elected at Lazarus Naturals to do that, and I've continued to do that since then. And since then, we've expanded into 2 different states. We've taken on more federal level activity and things of that nature. But I think the main point, and I won't get too deep into it, but the main point is, and what I like to tell everybody is that there's still a lot of work to be done, and one of my favorite sayings is, the future truly belongs to those who show up for it. And if we leave this conversation today learning one thing, I'd want you guys to really take to heart that it really is true that the future belongs to those who show up. And if you sit back and you think, oh my gosh, things are not as they should be, you can't really complain if you don't show up and speak your mind and really try to enact the change. So there's things to be done. If we leave it to those folks who are, in the legislature, legislators are great folks. They do a lot of great work, but they need us to interact with them so they learn what the industry is doing, what we're up to, what our priorities are, what are some of the trials and tribulations. Without us making that contact and really communicating, then they really have no idea. And they, what happens when people don't really have an idea? They make poor decisions, and usually out of good intentions and what they think is rational. But education really rounds out the rationality. So that's what I wanted to lead off with.
I entered the industry in 2014 on the medical side and transitioned into rec. And 2015, I was, and I wanted to get involved right off to the transition to rec, so I could understand the dynamics of what's, what's our starting point, what's the state's position, and then really determine if it's a good business model or not, So I was on the first rules advisory in 2015, and I quickly realized I was the only one with really any manufacturing of food products. I was on the edible side, and there really weren't any people there of any scale in food manufacturing, and so I had unique experience because I've been in food ingredient manufacturing and specialized formulations and applications to food products my whole life in corporate America and in my own business. So that was a red flag to me. I stayed in the rec side. I still have a rec processor license for edibles and topicals, but I turned the lights down. $125,000 label change on prepackaged packaging was all it took for me to move into hemp. So opened up another facility, Unique Food Works, we're a hemp handler, we're food safety licensed. And we run informal manufacturing food safety programs like I did in the food industry. So they're not formalized, not certified, because technically, Schedule I drug, no one's going to certify you as being CGMP or anything. But the move into the hemp side was good. So my short time on the rec side, I did do some work in the legislature. Started as a founding member of the one cannabis group that was successful at the time, gone now. I exited about 2 years into it because it evolved into a direction I wasn't interested in going, and moved. I was into hemp then anyways. On the hemp side, I was a member of the Oregon Industrial Hemp Farmers Association, and which they did a lot of fine work. There are a lot of challenges. Where do you start to create this industry from a regulatory standpoint, under the pilot program? So there were a lot of challenges. I don't think anyone would get it perfectly right, and I think they did a great job to at least start the process. And I was involved somewhat there. I guess what I kind of discovered was didn't really utilize like my experience, and I really get into this because I was retired, to impart my experience to help the industry grow. And if I can't do that, then I'm going to look for other ways to do it. So I started going to the legislature myself and meet with some legislators and at least start the conversation of how some of these pieces of legislation and rulemaking affects business and the operations, and future growth. So, that I haven't really, I wasn't a lobbyist, or I just show up. And then about a year ago, I decided it's time to hire a lobbyist. And at this point, I was one of the early members on the hemp side, so I knew people and knew a lot of hemp handlers and growers. And so hired a lobbyist on my own, and then went around like with the collection basket at church, It was about $40,000, right? So collected money, participants, and so then we kind of had an informal group with a lobbyist, right? But the group's formalized now, because our relationship here, Bonny, Joe, and I met about a year and a half ago when I was giving public testimony at ODA, and she's based out of Tacoma, and she was working on legislation there because they had, pretty poor legislation on the books, and she got involved. And so she asked me, hey, get me up to speed on what's going on in Oregon. I said, yeah, I'll give you the good news, the bad news, the good and the ugly, and the direction to go. my opinions. So that's how we got involved and kind of spun off into Lazarus Naturals and a core group of hemp handlers here in Oregon that really were questioning, what's the future for them. If you're a hemp handler and you're in the extraction world, you're investing a lot of money without having a lot of answers up front. So truly, it's high risk. Our agenda was, if nothing else, we stirred up some questions. We were a new voice at the legislature last year, and not that there's anything wrong with the original people. I was one of them, I guess, but just felt that we need to bring a little more to the table for the hemp industry group here in Oregon in the future. So, if nothing else, I think some aspects of legislation and rulemaking, the problem on the hemp side for legislation and rulemaking, as far as my opinion is, they wanted to be it was cost neutral program. So in other words, this is the way I understand it. The governor says, yeah, sure, let's do it, but don't spend money. So what they do? They utilize existing infrastructure. So hemp industry in Oregon's treated like we're marijuana. So we test in marijuana labs, not in hemp labs. We follow, and I saw this happen, marijuana rules were just copied and pasted into the hemp industry. So here we have, you have to test every 30 pounds, if you want it to go into smokable. Well, try to manufacture hemp cigarettes and test every 30 pounds. It's not possible. So, but to be cost neutral, it was a copy paste, figure it out later. Well, you ever try to change legislation? It doesn't happen overnight. It takes years. I think if you really have your shit together, if you can change legislation in 2 years, normally without emergency provisions, you're lucky. Then after that, you have to go to rulemaking. That takes a year or two. So rulemaking changes are the best manipulation of the way the business runs, in the state, or you run your business. But even then, it takes, short session. They don't want to deal with anything but emergency situations. We're in short session now. Long session, and this is just legislation, but rulemaking comes after. Everything just takes time, So inaccurate or poor rules that get built around a new piece of legislation, that in itself might take a year. It might not even be enforced for a little longer, but you want to make changes, then ODA has to really approve it, or the legislature, or the changes themselves. Sometimes it takes a new piece of legislation, so you get caught up in, being locked in a box. But so we're working together from a business standpoint, and our strategy was Washington State is looking for a good, healthy program. So essentially, most of the good that we're doing here went north, because if growers here can't grow because of overburdening legislation and rules, cross the river. So it was really to protect our business here and give growers and handlers an option to go across the bridge. And at the same time, this wasn't a negative to Oregon. At the same time, Washington Department of Ag and Oregon Department of Ag, where I know them real well, and Washington, Bonny, Joe knows. I know Oregon, she knows Washington. We got them both on the phone and talking and said, please, let's all work together on this. And just yesterday, we had a meeting with the head of USDA, the guy filtering all the rule change, the draft rules federally and what to do. And in that meeting, there was Oregon Department of Ag, Washington Department of Ag, ourselves, and Bill Richmond, the And it's his responsibility to sort all the pieces out here, put the puzzle together for our National Hemp Program, which is really an international program. If we can't function nationally, we won't function internationally. So I guess we set out and our goals were set. I think we accomplished a lot. It just takes time. But everything we do, we don't get paid. Bonnie Joe's volunteer lobbyist, so we do our best to help each other. We're here for the industry, and it's not our means of making money. We're in the industry, so we want to, make money through our efforts, but we're not paid to do this. We're here for you, for the industry. So, and we're an open book. You have issues, concerns. We're the Association of Western Hemp Professionals, the Industrial Hemp Association of Washington State, soon the Industrial Hemp Association of Oregon. We have members, we're in Colorado, North Dakota. It's word of mouth, because we're for all of you. We're for the industry. And we're for good regulations, good legislation, good rulemaking. And at the federal level, there are lots of reasons not to make the right decision, but at least we're, it's not a perfect world, but we're the voice for you, at least from our perspective. And I've been in private industry. I've relied on my own wits most of my life, worked 10 years corporate America. I understand trench fighting, understand being down, understand coming up. So wanted to do this on my part, personally, to help all of us go up. Because I knew the challenge is, I was in the food ingredient industry. Hemp is, in many ways, an ingredient. And once you have all the parts and pieces laid out in front of you, and the whole complexity of it and the opportunity has yet to be understood unless you really understand the food ingredient side or ingredient applications. Most of it's not even defined yet, because when you say CBD, you say hemp, people think CBD. Well, it's way bigger than that, from, distillation of terpenes. And it's a whole new classification of essential oils, isn't it? So, there are lots of good things coming. I see it. Doesn't mean that everyone has to, but I like to have the industry positioned to take advantage of what's coming, the different cannabinoids. People talk about CBD. There's, CBDA, there's CBDV, CBD, CBG. Well, what is that? But, okay, we're moving into it. But there's, different cannabinoids of CBG. And we're restricted from making claims, but what we're not restricted from is developing the terpenes associated with hemp by variety, steam distillation, and opening up, new aspects of the essential oil industry, So that's an opportunity. But in the Israeli model, is cannabis for life, cannabis from birth to death. They have applications of cannabis sativa from birth to death, different aspects of the plant. It's part of their life, part of their health regime. So a lot in front of us, but anyways, I've spoken quite a bit.
Well, I wanted to elaborate on a point you made. I do a lot of work for Lazarus Naturals. We sit on the U.S. Hemp Roundtable with the American Herbal Products Association. So I have quite a bit of interaction with folks from all over the states, and really this AWHP thing, at least for me, in my idea, and all the folks sitting here share it with me, and the folks that we work with, our other members across all the states that Bill had mentioned. There's certain folks out there that have allegiances with each other, and it really shows like how powerful that sort of thing is. And when I look back home here on the West Coast, there's a little different mentality. A lot of East Coasters, Midwesters understand DC, understand that kind of old traditional Americanism and lobbying and getting together and forming trade groups and things like that. Out here on the West Coast, a little bit more mavericky. I love it. It's my home. But it's definitely kind of there's more of a hippity-hoppity, get off my property kind of mentality out here, which I certainly appreciate. But that being said, there's a tremendous opportunity for folks like us to get together and even if it's a report to a legislator that, okay, this is what we're fighting about, that sort of thing is tremendously useful to those types of folks, because then they can actually contextualize, okay, well, here's side A and side B to the situation, and okay, that really informs me in making my decisions and what I want to support as far as bills go. So just wanted to add into that this AWHP thing is a response to that, and we welcome anybody who is interested in having that conversation and really filling that void on the West Coast here that I've seen, and I think other people have agreed with me as well, that there's opportunity to band together. Like I said, even if that means sharing the conflicts we're having that are arising and the debates that are arising, not just one, okay, here, unified mission, unified message.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, and as we're all learning and growing as the industry evolves, we don't all necessarily agree. Even people in both Industrial Hemp Association of Washington, which I have about a little over 500 members at this point, but it was free up until this month, so we'll see how that actually plays out. But we have a lot of involvement, and there's quite a few members that are here at this event the last couple of days. The Industrial Hemp Association of Washington, I'll go back up a little bit. I started that in 2017 in Washington State. I went to go get a hemp license. I knew that we were only able to do research on fiber and grain, but I had gotten into the industry 25 years ago trying to diversify the timber industry in Washington. So a lot of you may know the history of the demise of hemp when it reached the prohibition level. A lot of it had to do with Weyerhaeuser and DuPont in Washington State. And so I was instructed, if you want to really make some change, go to the source. So that's where I started. I didn't have any clue what I was doing. I got laughed at. I got kicked out of offices until I got in front of one of the Weyerhaeuser family members, one of the daughters and granddaughters, actually, and was able to ask some questions and ask, okay, so is this something that's, that you see that I would be able to get a meeting with somebody about, to talk about how we can not replace the timber industry with hemp, but diversify and start the research and start bringing this back into the marketplace. And I was told that they were already in those discussions and to wait 20 to 25 years. And it was about 20 to 25 years before they quit lobbying against hemp. So when 2017, I went to go get a license. It was the middle of October, so I could get ready to do my test run in 2018. And I was told that there was no more money to process applications. They had run out of money. And they were going to close down the Industrial Hemp Research Pilot Program. And so I'm like, okay, well, how do I get you guys some money so we can keep this going? And I was instructed, well, you need to go get money in the budget, do this thing called a proviso. And I'm like, okay, well, what's a proviso? So, I literally had to learn as I went. I was just thrown in there. I had like 3 weeks to prepare. And so I'm like, okay, I did have somewhat of a nonprofit background. And it was, you're not going to be able to do this alone. You're going to need to get stakeholders and people in the industry behind you. And so I started the Industrial Hemp Association of Washington, was able to get the money through the legislators and kept the program going. And by the time the Farm Bill passed, I had about 50 members. And then by the time we passed our program bill in Washington State, it just kept. I couldn't even keep up there for a while, and had to get volunteers to help out. So in 2018, with legislators, stakeholders, and the Department of Ag. We wrote the hemp program bill for Washington State. We didn't exactly get everything we wanted, but we got a lot of what we wanted to get through, which was mainly a remediated whole plant sample, and we were going to have a post-harvest test starting this year, but that's not going to happen. And also a HPLC no heat testing protocol, so we would be able to we thought we were going to be going with the Delta 9 end of things, but that's not happening either. So on the USDA end of things, that's a really how we've been focusing. And then so with the Association of Western Hemp Professionals, that being a 501c6, that is our representation as a group is on the federal level with committees that will be in each state. But if we don't get things happening on the federal level, if we don't make this industry work for all of the states, not just the western states, we don't have an industry. And we can discuss things on the state level. I mean, it's a constant situation in Washington. Bills keep coming. Many bills in Oregon here, in short sessions. And so everybody working together, not just on, okay, how can we compromise, because we're not all going to agree on everything. How can we compromise, and how do we bring this to legislators, like Dylan was saying, so they understand? And it's not just one conversation to get them to understand what hemp is. They're like in Washington State, in a regular session, they're dealing with, each house is dealing with 700 bills at least that go flip-flop back and forth. So I don't know how many bills go through Oregon, but we're talking about a short session. So anything we need to get done, whether it's Washington, Oregon, any of the states that are working on things, that has to, we have to get together on this and make this work. But on the USD end of things, it literally is taking everybody together, but in a respectful way. We need to get what we agree and disagree on. Like I said, find that compromise, but be able to still get that out there. When we were talking to legislators, they do want to know the pros and cons. It's not just blow some sunshine up my ass and I'm going to pass a bill for you. So just getting that information and getting the right people in the room. So like in Washington, we had a meeting with a legislator, and we had, our lab person wasn't able to come. So we had to just we did pretty good, I feel, winging it. But we were able to have him in the room to explain the scientific end of things in a way that the legislators can understand, and sometimes only a 15-minute window. It's getting those points and getting them in there. But I kind of want to talk a little bit like how Bill was saying of where the kind of what other things are out there. How are we evolving with this industry beyond just CBD, the things we need to talk about? So the CBG, yes, we're going to find out a lot about that this year. There's some pretty interesting genetics coming out, both on the full season and the autoflower, since we've definitely realized the last couple of years, the western part of Oregon and Washington, maybe we shouldn't have some of these full season genetics growing in those areas. So now, what do we find that works? What autoflower can we find that's going to be mold resistant and that's going to have good cannabinoid profiles, but also that we're going to be able to get out of the field and aren't going to be hot. And there's some research also going on some of the traditional fiber and grain varieties crossing even with autoflower. So there's amazing research out there. So, we got to build an industry on the legislative issue. But if we don't have the genetics that we need, also it doesn't matter what laws we have if we don't have anything to grow. And that is going to take a while to get there. And that's really what the associations bring to the table is this is going to evolve. We're talking, 10 years for some of this infrastructure to come on. And we've been saying that for 2 years. But we're still 10 years out for the biofuel end of things, for the nanotechnology. And I'm not talking about water-soluble stuff. I'm talking about supercapacitors, batteries. There's already research on the conductivity of specific hemp plastics with microchips. So there's a lot to evolve too. But, that's kind of, the end down the road. When we're talking about genetics and where this is going in the next, 2 to 5 years, these dual purpose varieties. I see that starting with the grain varieties that will also have good cannabinoid profiles. So there's the CFX2 grain variety out of Canada, which Flower tested out just a first-year farmer, well, not a first-year farmer, but a first-year growth. They had 5% CBD in their flower. And it's that those genetics are being advertised as 5 to 8, I believe, and they're already figuring next year that they should be able to get in between that 6 to 8 more commonly. So there are going to be genetics coming that you can get the grain and you can still extract. So the next step will be more on the fiber end of things and the building materials. I don't really see the clothing and the paper happening for another 5 to 7 years on a scale that is affordable, because that'll have to have a lot of changes, not only in the regulations, but the cost of the genetics. The certified varieties that are in Canada, those have been proven out. In Washington, the first bill that I put in had it so all of the certified genetics in Canada would have been able to be grown in Washington State without being tested. And then if something had been grown in Oregon for 2 years, showing that there were stable COAs, the next year, then it would have been a certified seed. So we were able to knock off 2 years of the certified seed process. That didn't pass. Washington really, really fights, well, like a lot of places. They don't want to be regulated, but they really fought against it. The farmers were like, we want to grow whatever the hell we want. We don't need your protection. So the legislators had to let that go, and we wanted a program. So we said, okay, if we got to get rid of it to get a program, that's what we got to do, and we'll use best practices, and we'll get there. And that takes communication to use best practices to get anywhere and build an industry together, any kind of industry. So getting people talking to each other and sharing information from the farm level all the way through marketing and legislation. In 2018, we had one grower. We had 119 licensed growers this year, and some of those had multiple plots. At the very beginning, most of the farmers wouldn't even talk to each other because they didn't want anybody to know what they were doing for different reasons, whether it was competition or, they were diversifying. They were hops growers, they were cherries, they were apples. And midway through the season, they started realizing, we don't know what we're doing. We actually do need to start talking to other farmers in other states and talking to each other on, sharing equipment and knowledge. And I had tried to get people to not grow more than 2 acres unless they were doing a partner farm with somebody that knew that had grown before. A lot of them didn't listen. Some of them did, 10, 30, 40, 300. I mean, you can only say things so many times. But it is sharing the information, and especially the mistakes. Okay, we know that this doesn't work.
That's
help other
primarily
people.
the conversations.
Yes.
This didn't work. Don't try that.
Don't try that. But people still will try it.
Yeah.
So you can't get to everybody. But it is, okay, don't repeat the same mistakes, just like parents are like, you hear all this stuff as you're a kid, yeah. They're telling you that for a reason. Don't make the same mistakes I did. It's trying to make things a little easier on you. So with that, I guess if you guys have.
I have something. Yep. Yeah, just to circle back to my opening remarks, I guess. We look at the difficulty that is on the federal government's shoulders now of rulemaking. So we have draft rules, and once draft rules come out, it's easy to go through and pick them apart and make suggestions and so forth. But a real key, some key issues around draft rules at the federal level and why they occurred, first of all, is the DEA is involved. Well, why are they involved? Okay, so, but if you back up to just look at, and I'm not picking on Oregon, it's just a really great example of where you take laboratories that test Schedule 1 and you put hemp in there, well, DEA oversight kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because they really probably have oversight there too in the labs. So DEA is involved in rulemaking that's going on in Washington, D.C. So why is that? Well, and you know, I'm not a grower, but I do know that hemp is grown for primarily two different reasons, right? So for sale of flower, trim bud, or for the sale of mass or biomass that's used for extraction, right? Otherwise, it's not for ornamental use. They're the two primary uses. So when you're growing for flower, there's a little bit of flower business in Oregon, but you trim it all up, make it look really nice because we're real good bud trimmers here. Sell it out of state, it's hot. It's federal offense. So the hemp industry is guilty of being a black market business to a certain degree. It just happens. So should the DEA be involved? Well, that's their wheelhouse. We invite them in by doing this. Biomass can be totally compliant at the point of harvest, proven with a test, not necessarily pre-harvest test, but right at the point of harvest, when you harvest mechanically and chop it, goes into a bulk body, you pull a sample, have the lab homogenize it, chop it up, and test it, it'll be compliant. That's the business that we're talking about when we say industrial hemp. It's not true. You want to trim flowers? Get a license from OLCC. You want to trim flower? Get a 502 license in Washington State. There's plenty of opportunity there if you want to grow CBD flower, trim them up, and sell them. That's the market model to get them to consumers. The outlets already exist. So by trimming up, selling interstate has put a cloak of darkness over us now. And how can you deny the fact that, I guess DEA is here for a reason? So we have to be self-policing. When I started in the late 60s in the food industry, it was the Wild West. Man, you know, you were food manufacturing with conveyors going overhead and paint falling down, and you know, there was really no great structured regulations, but you know how it got regulated? Primarily through the industry. It was self-regulation. Because human nature, you know, when we're invested in something, whether personally, money, or your mind, you always, continuous improvement is just generally part of, you know, especially you're an entrepreneur, you're never standing still. You always want to have that next level. So the food industry cleaned itself up primarily, and you think it's highly regulated, well, somewhat. FDA issues guidance for labeling. ODA comes in, makes sure you have a triple sink, hand wash sink, and a bucket sink, and there's no paint falling down. Otherwise, it's the company's responsibility to initiate CGMPs, and certified CGMPs, you know, I don't know. Compliance is what it's all about because you're audited by third parties. Compliance is the key thing, whether it's, in my mind, you know, I mean, I've been out of manufacturing for 10 years, you know, heavy manufacturing, food ingredients, but we self-developed our own HACCP program, which is most generally accepted food safety program in North America, widely used in Europe and used now in pharmaceuticals. So the food industry regulated itself. Companies that didn't keep up were bottom feeders or they were gone. So we need to self-regulate. And, you know, I know a lot of people in the industry, and even last year, pre-planting, I was asked by a number of people, you know, what do you think about growing for flower? I said, Well, you want my honest opinion, I'll tell you, it's a failed business model. Because look at all the other states growing. Do you want to sell across state lines? Because you're going to have to. And if you trim it, most of it's going to be hot. The majority's hot. So do you like oatmeal? Because you'll be eating it every morning. See, we're the low-hanging fruit right now for the DEA. We're easy targets for the DEA. They don't even, they won't even have to go in the bushes at night. We do it openly during the day through the post office. So trim flower, in-state, Oregon's not going to bother you. Some states will. Trim flower for interstate, no. The opportunity, and I've been internationally working on this, is we all know the industry's in a tight spot right now. Prices have dropped dramatically for biomass. Prices dropped for extracts, for isolates. The international market, you see, we've created something here that has a value that I think people don't understand. Being in the food ingredient business, we're always looking for that leading edge ingredient that's going to give us an edge over our competition. We're talking about it right now. So traditionally, you have fiber varieties or strains. You have grain or seed strains. And both of them, they aren't grown for CBD. Well, over the years, a new variety of industrial hemp was created here, Oregon, Northern California. This is the cannabinoid variety. This is the robust variety that doesn't exist in the hemp world internationally. And these countries are looking at us, and the people are saying, we want it. Well, we've got the key that unlocks the door. If we can't enter the international market, then, maybe we've hit the bottom. Maybe we'll come up a bit, but we're in for some big adjustments. My opinion is we have to open up international, and then we're going to have another big run. And how long that run will last? Could last for years. Because CBD, people say hemp or CBD, they think hemp, but it's so much more. Just CBD alone could run for years. It's been estimated the CBD grown and produced today would barely service 2% of the demand internationally. So that's where we all need to get together. But that's the huge opportunity that's in front of us. So international will heal up everything, and then we all need to reset. It's my firm belief that USDA is going to initiate grower registration and the equivalent of a hemp handler registration. So how do you sort out true industrial hemp growers versus boutique flower growers? My belief, and I'm not doing this just to talk, I expressed it, is on the registration there should be 2 boxes that the grower has a choice. Check 1, check 2. 1 states you're a flower grower, and box 2, you're an industrial hemp grower. So that will immediately determine how you do a pre-harvest test. Because if you're a biomass grower, why would you sample a bud? Your customer's buying a collection of the whole plant that's ground up. So what's hard for people not being, deeply involved in this industry is when you're hemp as a functional food ingredient or additive, it's. Okay, run out of time.
We're running out of time.
So there's a
all good
lot
stuff.
to it. Want to talk more, ask me. Thank you.
And just to follow up real quick on what Bill was saying, there's a lot to get involved
Yeah.
with on
Oh, yeah.
on both the national and international aspect to it. There's a lot that's getting worked out, and as we spoke with Bill Richmond yesterday, and as they put in the interim rules, that they don't want to regulate export. They want us to do it, and so we
But
need
that's
it all
the
to come
natural
together.
occurrence anyway.
Yes,
Yep.
exactly. So just putting that out there, they're not interested in regulating export at this time. So we're going to open it up to questions. We have about 1 more minute.
I could talk, so.
I just have one quick question. If we want to get involved, if we want to get involved with your organization, do we just leave our card with you, or how would we
Yeah,
just
that's the best
stay
way
in
to
touch?
approach us. There's a sign-up sheet at our booth too. If you can put down your email, phone number, category. The idea with the AWHP is it's not just CBD manufacturers. It's not just farmers. It's pretty much everybody from seed to sale, as it is. And that's the intention, because there's a lot of groups out there that focus on farmers, a lot of groups that focus on manufacturers, usually split by dues. So we're trying to make a competitive due structure that's going to invite everybody, and we'd like to see everybody.
Yeah, I just noticed that there was more and more associations. I was just wondering how you guys all collaborate on some of this stuff. If there's open dialogue between, all these different hemp associations.
There's a lot of cross membership, and so yes, so like the Industrial Hemp Association of Washington and the Association of Western Hemp Professionals, and then also Colorado, then Montana. There's a couple of different associations there that have merged, and so they're part of the Association of Western Hemp Professionals. We've slid into North Dakota because they asked us to, and so they'll be involved as well. And there's a new grain processing association that's forming that we hope we'll be working with as well. So we're trying to get as many associations together and bring the ideas to the table as well as the arguments.
And a lot of the relationships have been developed functions like this.
Hi, thank you all for speaking today. I'm Craig Hawkins from Treasure Valley CBD out in Eastern Oregon. You guys talked a lot about legislation today and lobbying and some of the aspects of how rules get changed. I was just wondering if you guys could elaborate on the compromises that you guys were talking about within the industry and different sectors of the industry getting together and communicating. What you've seen in terms of those compromises, and who are the players in that? We're a small farm. And so I'm just curious, our interests might be slightly different from another operation that isn't a grower or has a different model down the supply chain. So could you just elaborate on compromise between different sectors of the industry and functionally, like how we can get together? Is it through associations like the Western Hemp Professionals that we collaborate and join up and just participate in that way? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the easy one, the most immediate one that comes to mind is the interaction between our side of the cannabis plant and the cousin plant, marijuana. And we have a few members that do both, hemp and marijuana, within our association. But a lot of that compromise comes from, understanding the plights that they have on that side and the barriers to entry, like I mentioned at the beginning of the talk. And, understandably looking at our plant, both sides of the plant understand it's the same plant. So that side of the plant looking over and saying, hey, that's not really fair. It's the same plant. You're under an arbitrary 0.3%. You can sell across state lines. I have to do all this regulation. It's the same plant. What's going on? That is the most immediate one. But coming to the table and trying to communicate, look, it's in the best interest of the plant. And access to cannabis sativa L that we work together. And in the case of marijuana, if it's unfortunate that there's so many barriers to entry, because like Bill had mentioned, there's gonna take a lot of work to undo. A lot of it will be mediated, I guess, by legality. Of course, there will be some stipulations, but we'll still have to deal with deregulating that side of the business, and by kind of ushering in and just assuming, hemp should just follow the same structures. It's not in the interest of the plant. So that's at least the first compromise that, coming to the table and talking with those folks and saying, okay, let's get together on this, because we both have the same goal. Yeah. And if we infight, it's just gonna get worse.
I Oops.
Say one thing real quick.
We're gonna have to wrap it up because we got
Okay.
coming in and we gotta set them up, so.
Okay, so the flip side of that is the state's needs and how they satisfy their needs from a legal standpoint, Justice Department, the governor's office. And then, so when it comes to legislation, they get first dibs, right? So their legislation through a committee hits, and we're not in on that. People sit at the table that don't know, they don't understand our needs. You know, they're administrators. We need a seat there. That's the answer.
Thank you, everybody, and
Yeah,
we're
thank
available
you,
for
everybody.
more discussion.